Hello, folks. Welcome to Between Awesome and Disaster. This is your host, Will Carey. I appreciate you tuning in wherever you are in space and time. And if you are outside, I hope you're staying safe. Hope you're wearing a mask and fighting the good fight, as I know you are. And also, if you're not wearing a mask, wear a mask. If you think they don't do anything or you think it's some symbol of tyranny, you're wrong. It's not up for debate. You're just wrong. I've been vexing on this particular thing a lot as we have now entered the conspiracy theory stage of the coronavirus pandemic, which is still ongoing, and it makes me sad. Some of the anti-mask things that I've seen circling on the internet, the attempts of shaming employees by people who don't wear a mask and are subsequently refuse service. And I don't want to give any of these the attention they deserve by naming their names, but it just makes me incredibly frustrated because if everyone just decided they were going to accept a minor inconvenience to help those around them, I feel like this could be over faster, and it makes me worry that the collective intelligence of the country is not high enough for us to survive this. But that's just where I am right now. I know that there are plenty of people, and New York is an example of that, as we currently enter phase 2 of reopening, of what you can do when enough people take the appropriate measures and do the right thing. I was fortunate. I was happy to the first day of the barbershops reopened. I went out and got my hair cut with while wearing a mask, and everyone in the shop was also wearing a mask, as many precautions as were taken. So I felt a little bit more human just by doing that one little thing, because my hair was getting to the point where if it had gotten any longer, I would have been legally required to become the bass player in Steely Dan. So gladly didn't get to that point. And I'm here to and I'm here today to just share a really great conversation I had recently on the show. My guest on the show today is comedian Sean Donnelly. Sean has been on appeared on Late Night. He has done Conan. He's done Stephen Colbert. He has an album that you can listen to wherever you get your comedy albums called Manual Labor Face. And he's one of those guys that I always laugh a lot every time I see him perform. He's very nice to me. He's what I think a great example of somebody who understands the job of stand-up comedian, and he does it incredibly well. And this conversation kind of reinvigorated my love of stand-up comedy, because it's very easy, as I'm sure many of you know, in any kind of field, not just a creative field, I don't even think, a lot of the negative sides of being in that industry, especially if you are dealing with people who are criminal or at the very least immoral as far as how they treat others and those around them, to let that affect you. And it's something I think about a lot, and I try not to let all of the things that suck about the things I love distract or make me forget why I love the things I do and the things I do. And this podcast is helpful as far as remembering those things. And this is a great conversation that I had with a comic who I would love to be at doing the kind of things that he does. And it was really great to get to have this chat with Sean. Sean, again, I said his album Manual Labor Face is available wherever you stream or download your comedy albums, and he also has a radio show on Sirius XM. We're going to talk about that, but this is mainly a shop talk kind of episode about stand-up comedy from someone who does it, and we of course talk about how that profession is affected currently, and we're going to get into it now. So if you guys enjoy this, I have over 160 other episodes that you can enjoy as well. We'll help you fill the time, maybe fill the maybe bring you some relief if I can provide that for you. So thank you guys for being here, and let's go to my chat with comedian Sean Donnelly. Alrighty, here we go. Sean Donnelly, good to see you. How are you doing, man?
I'm good, man. I'm dealing with things like everybody else is. I'm hanging in, dealing with the quarantine, but I'm doing fairly well. But yeah, overall, pretty damn good. How are you?
I'm hanging in. My mindset, because I think mostly because I come from a really small town. I'm used to kind of just entertaining myself in my head and staying inside all the time because there's nothing to do. So I adapted to quarantine pretty easily. It sucks that it sucks that obviously you can't get on stage right now. But
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you because I would imagine as like a working comic that this was a kind of devastating and kind of pivotal career shift for you as far as your livelihood's concerned.
Yeah, this was a literal showstopper. It's because it stopped all the shows. Yeah, I do other stuff, but yeah, my main job is I don't have a day job. I do stuff. I'll make try out for some acting stuff, and I have a
Mm-hmm.
radio show. But my main source of income is live stand up. So yeah, this literally just made it non-existent pretty much for like 3 months straight, and that was kind of weird because I hadn't had that long of a break in probably since I started. I think even when you start out and you're just doing open mics, you're not getting booked, so you'll have a week between shows or whatever. But 3 months, I don't think I've had this long in 15 years, 14 years of doing comedy.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way because uh, there's stand up. I think is one of those things that if you aren't doing it constantly, the skill kind of starts to atrophy. It's not like riding a bicycle,
Yes.
like just
Yeah.
like even getting
And,
back to. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was saying even just getting back to not even talking about like the rhythm and cadence of like your set if you're doing like lots of longer sets, but just kind of the your whole rhythm can get thrown off. I went and saw I happened to be in Long Island City when Che did that parking lot show recently.
Oh yeah, I was there. Yeah, he's doing one tonight too. Sorry, but I don't know when the podcast comes out, but he's doing another one. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I'm glad that he's I guess constantly doing that. But you could tell he had hilarious stuff that obviously it's his first time back in 3 months. But just even like I guess if anyone's listening to this, even if you think like people who've reached like the peak of the industry, if you're not on stage constantly, it takes them a little bit of time to get back to it.
Yes, absolutely. And one of those things where it's like you can get rusty. So the regeneration time goes down. So like say Che he's been going up and he's been doing shows other places apparently because I saw Cypher posted they went to Ohio or they did whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I think they did the Chappelle shows, the one Chappelle did. So
Oh, cool.
he's been getting up enough that like if you went tonight and you saw him like a week or 2 weeks after he did the other one, you would notice a huge difference. Like the regeneration, like depending on how long you've been doing it, it's easier to get back on that horse after not doing it for a little bit. But like if you're a year in and you take 3 months off, you're almost starting over. But if you're 10 years in and you take a month off or 3 months off, you're getting back to it. You're getting your sea legs way quicker.
Yeah, I agree completely. Have you done it? Have you started doing like any shows in the last couple weeks? Because I know that or have you done like any Zoom shows? Because I live pretty close to the Bel Air Diner in Astoria, and
Mm-hmm.
I've walked. They've started doing shows in the parking lot there.
I haven't. Well, I haven't done any live shows. I've just been doing the Zoom shows, and I just got asked to do that Bel Air show, so I think I'm doing that in a couple of weeks or something. But yeah, no, I haven't been doing any live stuff. So but I've been doing digital shows here and there. I've been doing themed ones, which to me they're really fun. They're kind of fun because there's no stakes. It doesn't matter. Like
Yeah.
if I bomb on a Zoom show, I might be annoyed for a second, but I'm not gonna cry myself to sleep or freak out or run away. You know,
Sure.
it's not gonna you know, it doesn't have that same place inside of me to be like, oh my god, this has to go amazing. Because the only way those Zoom shows work, which I've noticed, I've seen people try to make it like a regular show, that doesn't work as much. It either has to be
Right.
conversational or you have to be like kind of riffing. Do you know what I mean? Like you're
Hmm.
riffing, you're ranting, you're going back and forth or whatever. Like it's kind of this like there's a certain pace that works better on those shows than just being like, "Hey, folks, welcome to the Zoom Comedy Club." Like that doesn't work at all. Like
Yeah.
the restrictions of stand up or the not the restrictions, but like
Like kind
the
of all of
main
the format, like
the
the
format, the
stage, lights,
boundaries
microphone.
of
Yeah.
yeah, like being in a club and all that, like doing it with the same cadences that just doesn't seem right to me because it's not the same thing. I don't think of the Zoom shows as stand-up shows. I think of them as like digital interview show or digital shows that are just different. It's not stand-up. People are like, oh, I'm doing stand-up online. I don't know if anybody's even said that yet, but I don't. It's not the same thing. Like if you don't have
Hmm.
a live audience there, like that's the whole thing. That's a lot of it. Like it's a much different vibe. It's a much different feeling. A much different like there's a different feeling in the air than if you're just in your apartment doing it to your computer screen. You know.
I know exactly what you mean. I've done one Zoom thing, but it was more of like a storytelling thing, which I feel like that form, because there you do have those, those are prone to those kind of long pauses, or more like a, if it's more of like a theater kind of thing. I feel like doing that felt a little bit more a little closer to doing it in front of people. But I agree with you. Like you can't replicate that kind of exciting, magical, like kinetic energy that comes from like being being in front of a bunch of people packed together, doing
Yeah.
the two, having drinks, and then just like feeling like the energy the crowd gives you from the laugh, and then you give it back to them.
Absolutely. That's where because it's also like what people don't realize, and it might sound a little bit up its own butt, but when it comes to stand up, there's about let's be conservative. There's 50 things going on in your head that the audience doesn't know about. There's the
Yeah.
thing where when you're telling a joke on stage, you're three jokes ahead of that joke. When you're the way that a certain joke does you're basing it all off what things are getting. So you might call an audible and switch things up. You're noticing very tiny things that are going on to change up what you're doing. Something happens in the room, you might bring attention to it to help along the set. Something like there's so many things that just don't match up with what a Zoom show is. A Zoom show, and don't get me wrong, it's like I said, it's fun in its own way. But there's very a lot of unspoken reactions and unspoken performing that's going on during a live stand-up show that just makes it a completely different animal than a Zoom show.
Exactly. Like you don't have to worry about like Friday 10:30 show. You're getting up to headline. You got to do 45 minutes, and then like 5 minutes in, you're like, oh, okay, the written material isn't working, so I've just gotta
Exactly.
riff
I
the
gotta do a
entire
half
half
hour of
hour.
crowd work and just yell at these people and chastise them for being drunk assholes. Right? Exactly.
Have you had sets like that? Have you like been like doing a weekend at a comedy club somewhere and just realized, okay, the act's not going to work. I gotta
Yeah.
make it all up. Oh wow.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I've had it. I've had it a few times, and you're basically usually it's a mix. Usually it's like a because what you try to do is you're doing the crowd work to get them on board with you, and then you can then when they like you, a decent crowd will be like, okay, cool. Well, you've earned your spot and letting us listen to you, whatever it is. But some of them you just have to be doing crowd work the entire time, and it's just getting through it and doing the job. I was in Illinois and I had a crowd that I'm not usually like I'm not confident on the side of things where I'm like I don't demand stuff when I go to headline clubs. I'm not in the place to do it. I'm just not that kind of person. So,
Right.
but they were so bad, and I saw how bad they were for the host and the feature that I was like, I told the lady, I was like, I'm going up and I'm doing 20 minutes and that's it. That's all I don't even know if I said it like that. I was like, I'm going to go up and do 20 minutes. I wasn't aggressive about it. I was just like, we'll see how long this goes and then we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
And she saw how they were. So she was like, yeah, you got it. Whatever. I don't care.
Mm-hmm.
And I went up and they were awful, like the worst audience I've ever had. And I just, you basically just, down the line, you're roasting them and they think it's the show. But really, it's just your anger at how bad the situation is. But
Yeah.
you're able to, because if you do it for long enough, you're able to turn it into looking like you're not actually mad. You're just joking around. You know what I'm saying? Like, so if you're like, you're trying to like just make fun of them and get through things and do your job, but in actuality, all you want to do is get off of there and you want to punch each one of them in the mouth. You know what I mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
so that's what I did. In this Illinois show, I just went up. I basically yelled at them, made fun of them when, it just did, like it's this weird thing where you do almost become a teacher where you're like, I'm not going to give you, it's almost like it's first day of prison or something, but way less dangerous where you're
Right.
like, I'm not
Right.
going to give you an inch to breathe. You're just, the only way those things can be done where it's a success is you're not even gonna. I had that in Boston once too, where they weren't even rowdy yet, but I could see them. You could see like some of them yawning, some of them are really drunk. So you get
Mm-hmm.
up and you're like, you're just gonna listen to me the whole time. There's not gonna be any. Nope, I'm gonna shut it right down. The minute it's almost like a parent or something. Where you're like, I'm gonna shut it right down. I think even Seinfeld said that where one time where I kind of thought it was a pompous thing to say, but in those instances, you kind of do feel that way, where you're like, nope, I'm not even going to let you get a word in edgewise. You're not going to. I'm the confident one in this because normally comedians we're so not in reality we're not confident. We're really just
Yeah.
vying for your affection when we're on stage, and we want you to laugh at the jokes that we've created, and we want it to go well. But when you after you do it for a while and you know how certain situations go, and it's kind of it's kind of a weird comedian empowerment thing where you're like, I'm not gonna let this happen to me again. I'm just gonna
Yeah.
get through this and do the job. Because the bad part would be if you get up there and you totally collapse, and then the lady has because that's then the club because that's the job part of it. Then the club has a right to go, what the hell was that? You tanked it and you pissed off 50 of our customers. They have a leg to stand on. But if you get up and you're funny while you're keeping your dignity, oh, that's a win-win for everybody.
Yeah, totally. And that comes with like the job part, the job
The
part,
job
the
part,
the
yeah.
ability to like to go in and succeed despite the circumstances. That's like I feel like when I talk to like really like what I would call like real like warrior like road warrior headline kind of comics, like the ability to go in and handle any kind of hazardous situation because and especially this is maybe what is becoming my bristlings with what's now called the alt scene is that those kind of if working in those skills like I feel like I became a better writer in those rooms, but I feel like every time I get to do a club, that's where I feel and I have to like handle a situation. That's where I feel like okay, this is the other part that this isn't the sexy part of doing stand up, but it is
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
the important part.
I think it's up for debate. What's the important part? I think the important part is your joke. So I think you have the right idea, in my opinion. I'm
Yeah,
not
yeah,
telling
I
you
agree.
what's what. In my opinion, I think the important part to comics is the act, and then and other comics respecting what you're doing, as at least in my personal opinion. But if you want to get to the point that it's like we said, it's the job, and that you're making a living doing this, yeah, I think especially in New York City, I think it's lost on a lot of comics that's part of it. So that the wrestling, the reining in or the actual like getting through a set that you're getting paid for is a thing. Like we used to go to the creek all the time, but if
Mm-hmm.
if you're only spending your time at the creek and that's it, you're not really doing comedy. Like you're not experiencing every notch in that every section of that wheel of comedy. You know what I mean? Like you're not. It's not happening. Because there's the same way that the people that just do clubs should branch out and do alt shows and bar shows is the same way that alt comics should do clubs and see what it that's the job part. Because I think a lot more in that world of alt comedy, which is kind of the lines have been very very
Oh yeah, it's gotten
very
very
blurred in my
blurry.
opinion. Yeah, very blurry, very blurry. But you don't see them going and doing road stuff unless they get famous for something they've done on TV or Netflix or some kind of internet thing. So and then you see that in like independent venues, and it stays along that alt world. I feel like. You don't very very rarely do you see an alt comic cross over to the club world, and I still think that rings true for the most part. I think it's mostly the same way, and I think that it's a matter of handling. It's the same way where it's like, how many club comics do you know that wouldn't be able to go and do a show in the middle of Brooklyn because it's just what they're doing is too tone deaf or too whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like getting that well-rounded experience. If that's not what you want to do, then you've achieved it. But if you want to become the best comic you can, you'll see what each. Cause that's how big the comedy scene in New York is. You can see every world of comedy basically. You can see black rooms. You can see the alt rooms. You can see regular club rooms. You can see, whatever it is. So what it boils down to is like, oh, how much time do you want to put into this thing, and how much you actually want to succeed in the moment and in the live moment. That's a whole. That's a street fight in itself, man. I've said that once before to somebody where I think I tweeted it because I was having some kind of existential moment where I was like, I'm like, I love comedy, but a lot of the times it's a street fight. A lot of it's not people like comedy's hard work. Comedy's not hard work. It's just difficult to deal with sometimes mentally. Like hard work is construction or whatever,
Yeah,
But comedy
exactly.
it's just something a lot of people won't do because mentally they can't handle like the punches to your ego.
Oh yeah, totally. And that even is like I've been thinking about this. Just the sheer risk of going on stage and opening yourself up to abject humiliation, regardless of if you're doing very personal stuff or if you're doing broader stuff. That risk is it can be devastating when it goes so wrong. But when it goes right, when it goes right, it's like no feeling other. I really I'm agreeing with these two sides of the craft here, and I wonder if this is maybe a product of your upbringing, because you're from Boston, right?
No, I'm from Long Island,
You're from Long
but
Island.
same thing. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. I apologize. I don't know why, but I just whenever I've seen you, because I would see you, like I see you around it, or I used to in the before times, see you around in rooms, and you always gave off a lot of like Southie, like working class
Yes, yeah, I've
Massachusetts
heard that
energy.
before. Yeah.
Whereas I've gotten it too, but if anything, I probably am like the more like hipster, like I'm going to be an author kind of Boston energy, which is. But you're from Long Island.
I'm from Long Island. Yeah, I'm from. So I started here. So I'm from the border of Nassau County and Long Island and Queens. So if
Uh
you
huh.
keep going east, if you, well, when you go to Jamaica, when Jamaica Avenue becomes Jericho Turnpike, that's where I grew up.
Okay.
So when I started comedy, I was already in New York, which is there's advantages to that and there's disadvantages. The advantages is it kind of makes you better faster because you're already in the. I didn't even realize that you're in the thick of things, but you are. You're kind of like you know, in the battle zone already in so many words. And then,
Mm-hmm.
but the other disadvantage is that a lot of people see you start out and probably have a very shitty opinion of you for your first however many years of doing comedy, unless
Yeah.
that gets corrected. Because think about how many times people we're all worried about doing our own sets. Nobody's really watching people and keeping track of how people are. But if
Of
somebody sees
course.
you early on in an open mic and you're 3 months in, they're gonna have this idea of you for a long time.
Yeah, I know, and that's what drives me mad also, because I would when I first got to New York, and I would like just open mics as many as possible, and then I would go through and I would see people on that I'm like, I've seen that person on TV, or I know that person's about to be on TV, and there's obviously you're just trying new stuff, and you got to give yourself that permission to fail. But yeah, I've definitely had that moment where it's like, oh god, anybody who's seen me at an open mic probably thinks I'm horrible at this.
Right. Exactly. That's what I mean. Like it's you had that battle of changing people's minds after you started to do it and get better at it because 99% of people are terrible when they start but you don't realize it. It's like this thing of like, well, I'm just going, I'm doing this. It's like, you kind of like, you have to be self-aware and delusional at the same time while you're doing it.
Yeah,
But
totally.
yeah, that I'm sure, but also it's an unspoken thing. So people are having these opinions, and they're not going to walk up to you and be like, "Oh, I thought you stunk. It was pretty good." Like that's not happening. Like
Yeah, yeah.
that's never happening. And I guess you're silently changing minds by if you keep doing better.
yeah, that's kind of the process because you'll see people will see you constantly, and then eventually like, oh hey, they're slowly
Yeah.
improving. Yeah, that's and when did you start? How old were you when you started doing stand up?
I to me I started late. I started when I was 28. So
Mm-hmm.
that's late in a lot of people's minds, including myself. I wanted to do it for the longest time and didn't have enough guts, and then finally did it, and then never stopped from there. Never took a break really. This is like I said, this is the longest break I've taken.
Uh-huh. So you started when you were 28, and was comedy like, were you a fan of comedy before
Yeah,
you started? And
huge fan.
uh-huh. And what kind of got you interested in stand up? Was it like late night shows? Was it like watching comics? How were you exposed to stand up?
So I was exposed to stand up. I used to listen to stand up records with my dad when I was a kid. So that's like the earliest as far as
Uh-huh.
exposure goes. And then we watched a lot of comedy stuff, but like George Carlin, he liked a lot. So
Mhm.
we Class Clown, which is one of George Carlin's like early albums, or actually not early because like he used to be different. So I forget what year it's from. It might be from 71, 68 or something. But
Mhm.
we had that in our house, and we would listen to that like ad nauseum. It's a really fun. It's before he got political. It's like when you're a kid, it's like this great. It was actually really funny to me when I was,
Uh-huh.
and then and then I just kept being interested in stand up. And me and my sisters used to watch all the shows, MTV Half Hour Comedy Hour. Like I'm older, I'm 42.
Uh-huh.
So there used to be back in the 80s and the early 90s, there was like 5 or 6 showcase shows on like networks. So they had VH1 Stand Up Spotlight that was hosted by Rosie O'Donnell,
Mhm.
MTV Half Hour Comedy Hour hosted by Mario Joyner, Comic Strip Live, which was hosted by Wayne Cotter. And then like Evening at the Improv was going on when I was way young. So like
Mhm.
stuff like that got me into it because I would watch these comics and then I would get into like Brian Regan was one of my early favorite comics.
Yeah, yeah,
And
he's
then when I got a little bit
great.
older, I was really into Jim Gaffigan when I was in high school. Like Jim Gaffigan used to have these 2 independent albums, which I didn't realize. We used to go to Tower Records all the time, and I bought 2 albums of his that I think he self-produced, basically, like,
Oh
or maybe
wow.
it was like some like indie record label that put them out because I don't think you can find them anymore. I kind of wish I had them still because I didn't know. I
Yeah,
thought they
those
were
are
just
like
like regular.
collector's items.
Exactly.
This is
One was
before oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no. I was just gonna say one was called More Moo Moos, and I forget what the other one was called. But this was before like the album boom and the online digital iTunes music. So it was CDs, and I had them, and I was obsessed with them. And then I got David Tell Skanks for the Memories. That was one of my early albums that I bought
Yep.
that I absolutely loved, and then from there I got into that crew. So I was introduced to stand-ups from like I used to listen to Opie and Anthony when and Howard Stern, then Opie and Anthony. But I liked it because you bring the comics on. So the Tough Crowd guys was like my earliest. That's what I liked a lot. So I liked Patrice O'Neill and Colin Quinn and all those guys.
Uh-huh.
So that was my that's my evolution of what I got taste wise, and then at some point, I just got into it, and I knew about all the stand-ups, and I was a pretty big fan. Like I would go to stand-up clubs, and I would go to stand-up clubs not as much as you think though, only a handful of times.
Mhm.
And then eventually, I started doing stand-up, and then my taste as you know, which probably happened to you, like when you're in it for a while, your sense of humor changes and your taste changes on who's your favorite.
Yep.
And then once you do it, the people you have respect for how they do it, you realize who's pulling off what you think is the best version of stand up.
Yeah, exactly. You sort it's sort of like when you're if you like if you're a fan of music and then maybe you play an instrument, you might because you know what's going on, you might find more interest in stuff that maybe isn't that's slightly different or slightly outside popular conscious.
Right.
Yeah, Tough Crowd. It took me a while to realize that Tough Crowd is essentially the Comedy Cellar table
That's where it came from. Yeah.
on TV is where that started. I got into that later, but that was pretty cool. I always I don't know if you've seen someone knitted together on YouTube like because I guess Dat Fan went on right after he won Last Comic Standing and
Yeah, it's
just got
brutal. Yeah.
obliterated because he had like
That poor
the
guy, man.
thing.
Yeah.
I know. Um, I I sort of kind of feel maybe not bad is not the right word, but I could understand how being in that situation would suck.
Absolutely. And the thing is this, I don't blame that fan. I don't even know if he does stand up anymore. He might I
I
think he
think he
acts a lot or
teaches.
whatever it is.
Yeah, I think he
Um
teaches also. Like teaches
he what
stand up.
he teaches what?
I think he might teach stand up also, or maybe he did at
Ah,
some
that's
point.
a shame. Here's the thing, it's like I think he's probably a hell of a nice guy, and I
Mm-hmm.
feel like he's a victim of a situation he couldn't control. I think getting too much success early on can that's kind of like that's pretty apparent what happened to him. And
Yeah.
because I used to hear stories that he would go on the road and he would only be able to do a half hour but I don't blame him for that because he kind of was thrust into this thing too soon.
Yeah.
And he was probably like, "How am I going to turn down all this opportunity?" Which he's wrong. But then also, he was kind of he is hacky technically, but you know what? Like, if it's him, it's him. You know, like what are you going to do?
I
He's
agree.
one of those cases where I'm like, comedy as the animal like swallowed him up. You know, like the world of comedy just kind of swallowed him up, and he probably wasn't made to last too long. And then he's kind of a flash in the pan kind of guy, and yeah, is he? But he also like there's a lot of people that do what Def Fan did. They just don't do. He got made fun of for it, but like a lot of people now, he's the go-to phrase when people their whole act is about their family and they're doing impressions of their family. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
so it's like, so which one? And a lot of those people aren't getting as much shit as that fan got. You know, like people.
Yeah. It's so
So I think if
strange.
that fan came out now, he would go. He'd have an online presence that would be killing it, and he'd be doing those characters on Instagram, and then he that would just even make him even bigger. I think he'd like fit into now. That's what's happened with stand up. People want that. People actually want that stuff. You know.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. It's interesting both how like the popular perception changes, and then also like how people decide like who's cool and who are gonna make fun of.
Who's
It's
exactly,
yeah,
exactly.
so strange to me because it seems
It's
arbitrary a
dumb.
lot of the times.
It's dumb because I'll tell you, man. It's like everybody's trying to make a living. Like whenever people come out and they're shitting on comics, I never understand it because I'm like, they're just trying to make a living in this thing. Like show business to me is different than stand up comedy. Stand up
Yes.
comedy, in the world of stand up comedy, yeah, I think that fan is shitty in the world of stand up comedy. But in the world of show business, let him do what he's gonna do. And if that avenue is doing live shows, then it's doing live shows. But stand up to me has a bunch of the stand up is like what comics don't realize because we kind of get on our you get on their soapbox a lot of the time. Stand up in show business is the lowest rung of show business.
Yeah.
The stand up is what the people in show business look to you to find out if they can make something else that's going to make them more money off you. The live side of the comedy business and the show business is just kind of like a filler. Look at all the people that go into it after nothing else is working out for them. It's like their last resort. So
Yeah.
we can't really get like this this attitude
Yeah. Air of
when the thing
superiority.
that you're so in love with is like nobody gives a shit about. A lot of people hate stand-up comedy. So when it comes to like, I think of it as two different things. Like some people are good at show business but shitty at stand-up comedy. But stand-up
Mm-hmm.
comedy, I have a lot of rules in my head for what I think is good and what I think is good. Like I even subscribe. You hear people say it. I'm like, there's probably only really actually great. There's only like 5 great stand-ups working right now. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah, I've heard that.
actually great. You know what I mean? I believe that. But are people kind of getting by? Yeah, I think of myself as somebody. I don't think I'm unfunny, but I think I'm getting by. I can be very funny. I can be very funny. But do I think I'm great? No, not by any means am I great. No way. No fucking way. It's a
Mm-hmm.
hard stand up is really hard. Stand up is really hard to perfect in my eyes. In my opinion, it's hard to perfect that thing that I'm looking for in my head. Do you know what I mean? Like that thing of like,
Sure.
oh my god, this guy nailed it. That kind of thing.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean, and I agree with you completely. It's comparable to me, like I grew up loving punk rock music, but I had to
Sure.
distance myself from it somewhat because the kind of like elitist, kind of gatekeeper attitude of some punks kind of made it unenjoyable. So I,
Right.
I kind of had to detach somewhat while still loving the form and loving a lot of the music. I'll say I think you are very funny, Sean. You are
Oh,
somebody.
thank you. I'm not saying that for that reason.
Oh no, no, but I also I wanted to say this as well because like thinking about like my level, like you're some like you and like Harrison Greenbaum and like everyone who's like a regular at clubs, Mark Riccadonna, you guys are all doing like the thing that you guys are all examples to me, and like this is gonna sound really pretentious, but kind of like you guys are a lighthouse in a sea of clouds of like because when I moved to New York and it seemed so big and impenetrable, like, oh, how do you get up at Stand Up New York? How could I get regular spots at New York Comedy Club? Things like that. You guys are you and other and your peers are all the lighthouses that thinking it is possible. If I just keep maybe if I just
Yeah.
head in that direction, maybe I don't follow the exact same path in the water, but there is light at the in the
Right,
clouds.
right. And I appreciate that. But what I meant more was like one of the greats, like kind of thing, where it's like the
Mm-hmm.
guys who have figured out the art of that figured out the art of the formula of the art of stand up. And that's my just like I said, it's my opinion. But don't I think I'm good. I appreciate that. I think I'm good at stand up. I just think that everybody has their own opinions on everybody's it's
Exactly.
like it's like that forever chase of like like that's I guess that's the sign of somebody when they're good that you're just looking you're constantly looking for that next thing to like to fix that next part of your act or fix that
Mm-hmm.
whenever you're not doing correctly,
Yeah, I know. I know exactly what you mean. Like the way, like when I listen to like interviews with Seinfeld, and he's just like I've been watching him do that Pop Tarts joke. Like I first saw him do it on Letterman like years ago, and then like the latest I saw him like talk about it in like a New Yorker video, and then I saw
Mm,
it in his newest Netflix special. Just watching that, he's just like obsessively like tweaking and thinking of how can I make this joke, uh,
right.
the best and funniest it possibly can be.
Yeah.
Um, and so when you started stand up, this is something I'm curious about as well. How long into doing stand up? What did the transition from like only doing open mics to like starting to get spots at clubs look like for you?
For me, okay, so hosting was an inroad to that. So,
Mm-hmm.
so anybody who listening, if you learn how to host, that you have to use hosting for you have to for your own reasons as well, your own advantages as well. So, like hosting was the reason that I got into the first club that I got into. The first club I got into was Stand Up New York,
Mm-hmm.
and it was because I did an independent show there, and it went well. And I happened the booker was there, and then I started being used as a host there, and
Mm-hmm.
then I was used a lot as a host there when the certain booker was there, and then with spots, and then there'd be a little bit less, but it was spots like that kind of thing. So, as far as the timeline, as far as your question goes, uh, that was probably for me because we kind of started the same way, where it's like the bar show thing a lot of people just start straight up in clubs and they're just like barking for clubs and they're working at the club to get stage time.
Yeah.
I started at bar shows, so I would start at bar shows in the East Village and bar shows in Queens at the Creek, and then bar shows. I ran my own at a comedy club, but in the basement, and really had no affiliation with the upstairs for a while.
Mhm.
It was comics that was
Yeah,
opening for
I
King for a
remember
long time.
comics.
Yeah, I used to have a show there on Saturdays and then an open mic on Mondays. So, and that was actually around the time when I started working clubs. I guess comics wasn't even the first club like the real room in the club that I worked. It was Stand Up New York,
Mm-hmm.
and it was because of hosting. So I think that was probably 5 years in, like 4 or 5. Yeah, probably 5 years in. I think because
Mm-hmm.
I didn't just start going to clubs right away. The way I started. I never took a class. I just went straight to open mics, and then from open mics, the people that I met in my crew was like the bar show guys, like
Right.
the bar show guys. So and then from there, when you're able to get a rec, then we get a rec for one club, and then I worked the stand for a little bit, and then eventually you get to the point where you work in a lot of clubs. So there's still clubs in the city that don't work me, but
Mm-hmm.
but the inroad to that was hosting because if I would host the club, and I had a moment where so I was hosting a stand up New York for a long time, and then eventually when they switched bookers, it was spots, and then I started. I was at the stand for a while. I was hosting there, and
Mm-hmm.
then I started hosting at hosting and doing spots at the Comedy Cellar, and then I would host so much that I made a decision to myself that the only place I'll host is the Comedy Cellar because it's helped me a lot over the past 5 years. Like it's helped me. It's a good place to be in there, and it's I don't mind hosting there. You know, they're packed shows, usually
Uh-huh.
packed shows. And I don't mind it. So that's when I told myself I don't want to really host anywhere else because I think I've I think I've earned myself to say no to hosting. And I got asked by Gotham to host, and I said, with all due respect, I only want to do spots there, and so let me know. And then a couple months later, they're like, hey, we have one spot here, one spot here. So it's just a matter of I kind of had this incremental evolution of
Mm-hmm.
climbing up to like where I was getting myself into whatever clubs I can get myself into. Like I didn't
Totally.
have the thing where I was like showing up and doing the mic there or at one of the clubs and then doing working after I was taking tickets, stuff like that.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
barked, but I barked for a bar show a long time ago.
Uh-huh.
And I would kind of just make my way that way. And then through Rex or through friends or through doing well on something, and then people asking me to come and do the club, that's how I got in over time. But it took me, I think people probably work clubs earlier than I started. I started like, probably 5 years in, probably 2011 is when I started in New York. So five
Mm-hmm.
years in.
Right on. Yeah, that sounds about that makes sense to me what you're saying. Is the Comedy Cellar the hardest room in New York? Because I've heard it can be very unforgiving. This is just comedy fan question.
Do I think it's the hard? No, I don't. I don't think. No, it's. I think most shows. I think there's a middle to what you're saying. So there's also what you hear from people is that every show is amazing at the Comedy Cellar. That's not
Hmm.
true either. But I've never ever the worst show at I've had one or two, and also I'm coming from a place of hosting and doing spots. So I've had a couple of shows there that were pretty brutal, but there's at least there's people there. Like I've had worse shows at other clubs with less people there. It makes it that much more brutal. Uh, is the hard? I don't think it's the hardest room to perform in. No, I think it's actually one of the best. Um, I think there's shows that can be great, but even the worst shows, most of the shows that aren't as good as the Comedy Cellar, you're kind of holding it up to a standard. So you're thinking it's not that great, but if you put that show somewhere else, it'd be a pretty decent show.
Right.
So no, I actually think Gotham is the hardest room to perform
Oh,
in
really?
New York. Gotham, it can be really. Maybe it's just me. Like I'm never that. I've done well at Gotham a handful.
Hmm.
I I don't perform there on a regular basis, but like I am not as happy when I walk off the stage as Gotham as I am at the Cellar. Cellar is like you can get comfortable. It's an intimate situation. Like
Yeah.
there's ways around it. Unforgiving. I think it's the name thing and the big pomp and circumstance that comes with the cellar stuff that
Yeah.
makes people real think. I think they think it's a much bigger deal, which it is. To be honest, the way that it's ran, it's closely monitored. I think you can. There's probably a lot more. The parents are way more at other clubs. I think they're not watching as much as they're watching at the Comedy Cellar.
Sure.
So
Sure.
in that regard, yeah, like if you have a couple of bombs there, do you think that you're probably gonna get less spots? Yeah, maybe you might. I don't know how they work it, but like, yeah, I would think that more than other places. I think they have more leeway other places because either they're not watching or they're just giving you more of a chance. Whatever it is.
Totally.
And you have a lot of the people you have come to the Cellar like comedy fans. So I would say I'll be 8 times out of 10. You're having a good show there. Like it's a good. You're mostly not having hard shows there. So if they're kind of right in the fact that if you're consistently not doing well there and they phase you out, that makes sense to me. That's the way it kind of should be if you really think of it. It's like a
Hmm.
meritocracy in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Absolutely. And that comes with that's how you create like a great room is by having that level of consistent like especially I think in New York where for showcase style stand up shows there are so many options to be able to cultivate that reputation of I might not know every name on the lineup, but I know they'll be great because they're here, so they're obviously great. Uh, that kind of
Yes,
reputation.
right. That's kind of it's cultivated that over the years. Yeah, exactly. And that's what to me, if I ran a club, that'd be a dream. That's what I'd want people coming on the reputation of the club. And there's other places like that around the country that people just show up. Like I've done clubs on the road that every show is sold out, but it's not because of me. I'm not famous. It's because the club gets people. They just have people there.
Yeah, that's how I feel about because I started in Baltimore. That's how I feel about Magooby's Joke House. I remember, I don't know if you've ever played there, but
I have.
Magooby's was originally like in the basement of a restaurant, and then it moved into this old dinner theater location. So now
Yes.
that's when it became like the A room of Baltimore. I love that place, and I do like the I had it's been a while since I've done a spot at the Comedy Factory in Baltimore, but every headliner I talked to on this show, especially, I mentioned that they had $20 all you can drink tickets, and everyone's just like, oh. everyone gets real nervous real quick.
Jeez, that's a disaster for comedy. Yeah, you'd be surprised. You go around the country, you realize some people just don't know. Because the thing about it is, we don't realize as comics, are like, oh, it's a bar business. It's a bar business with a show. All they're concerned about is like, are you buying drinks? Are you buying food? Are you? And the tickets are an added bonus, but club owners just want to pack it in and sell, 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 sell.
Exactly, because they're in the food and beverage business,
Mm-hmm.
and they are at a disadvantage because they're not open normal hours like a restaurant is, or at least
Right.
most of them aren't.
Right.
So they've got to make up as they've got to have more people in less time, and they got to get them drunk, get them fed, and get them the tip.
Right, and I guess the point that makes it up is ticket sales probably help make that curve a little bit less. You know, where it's ticket sales probably help as far as profits go. But yeah, but then you also have to make the ticket sell. That's why a lot of tickets are given away at places because they're like, we just want to get you in the room.
Yeah, exactly. And then to hear like certain comics talked about like, oh, like this guy, this crowd, this person's crowd, they drink a lot, or this person's crowd drinks
That
really
happens.
hard,
Yeah.
and then that becomes like part of their. I think that kind of that certainly would help as well, as terms of getting booked regularly.
I think it does. I absolutely think it does, and I think there's comics out there that do the trick with like, hey, let's have a shot with me, and then everybody buys an extra drink, you know. Like, yeah.
Exactly.
And it's a smart idea. It's a smart idea for the comic, and a smart idea, and it helps the club. So the club's probably ecstatic.
Mm-hmm.
And also like the crowd is probably like, yeah, we'll do it. Yeah, all right. It probably personalizes the show a little bit more.
Exactly. Something else I remember thinking really interesting, and this is maybe kind of a taboo person's comic's name to bring up, but I remember when I found out that like Carlos Mencia would like I guess tape each of his shows, and then you could buy the show that you just saw. I thought that was a really interesting idea. I know who I'm talking about.
Like a roller coaster with the photo.
Kinda, yeah. The same way you could see yourself going like ah. You could take home the show you just saw. I know any comedy nerds listening to this are probably like fuck you, Will, for bringing him up, but
oh yeah, well, who cares at this point? Who cares? You know?
I mean, now that Bill Cosby's a rapist, I think we could forgive Mencia a little bit. That's kind of what I think.
Yeah, it takes a little bit of the heat off that stealing that joke, I guess.
Yeah, I don't want to go too far down that road. Something I wanted to ask you because and maybe because I feel like you're more of a joke guy when I was listening to your album later, when you're headlining on the road and you're in those like tough you're in those like tough scrappy street fight kind of shows.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like you have to stick to a certain kind of joke or material? Do you ever try to do longer stuff when you're doing clubs on the road? Because I've always felt like it's hard to do a long like a story with punchlines when you're doing comedy clubs.
It's very hard. I would say no. I also have very short jokes.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
I've when I feel comfortable, like there's certain shows on the road that you're like 20 people will show up and you're like, we're gonna do this, and if they're actually what you realize is if they're actually good and they're excited to be there, I'm like, oh, let me try this thing that's a little bit longer and to take myself out of my comfort zone and really work on something and do new, and also it could be a little bit longer, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, most of the time when you're in that street fight situation, you don't. There's a weird fine line that you ride, and the fine line is you don't want to lose sight of yourself. Like that's where the whole idea of the hack comes. That's why hacks are born. It's not like those guys made a decision. I'm going to be a shitty comic.
Sure.
It's one of those things where if you're going outside of yourself and you start like you never want to get to the point where you're humping stools, but you want to get to the point where you're doing the job correctly. So you want to be making them laugh.
Yeah,
but you're still staying yourself. When you get to the point where you're just like you know The whole thing is you just mimicking having sex, or you're saying you're just being uncomfortable with, like, just making people feel uncomfortable in the crowd or something like that. Like that's to me, that's not what it is. To me, that's like you want to try to avoid that. I would say, like, the whole idea where you're coming outside of yourself, especially if it's not who you are. Especially if you go up there, if you're a joke guy and you're a one-liner guy, and you go up and then you turn around and you're Mr. Funtime USA all of a sudden, like, no, stay who you are. That's the thing. Like that's what it boils down to. But there's lots of times. There's times I've done tons of things. I've had hacky sets where I'm not happy with myself after it, and that's where it comes from. It comes from the idea where it's like, oof, I want to get through this. I want this to be successful. I want to do the job. I'm getting paid X amount for this weekend. And then during it, you you hear yourself say it, like you ask somebody a question where you know it's gonna get a big pop, because it's almost like this. It's this moment where you're, it's like necessary evil where you're going. Where you're going, I'm going to do this just so they'll listen to this joke I have about this. Because, or if you have an old line that you have that you don't want to say anymore, but you bring up an old joke that you're like, why did I do an old joke? Like, you get mad at yourself for going into that well, you know?
Yeah.
You see me? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because you're trying to do new stuff.
That well, but you have to survive. That's where the street fight aspect comes into. Not keep using that analogy, but it's true. Like, you're just trying to get through from most of it, and whatever wins you can sneak through for yourself, that's great. And then I think the whole idea of becoming good is, you're able to sneak through. You don't have to do any of that, and then all of it just wins for yourself, because either at that point you don't care and you're getting by on the strength of what you're saying.
Yeah.
Or you just don't care and you have the confidence of somebody who's like, I don't care how this goes at this point. Like, like whatever happens. I have different thoughts about that. I think you should always still be performing. If you're going up and just reciting your jokes, then they could just read them on a loose leaf piece of paper. You know what I mean? Like,
sure.
But I think you should always be in the room, and be aware of what's going on. And if something happens in the room, I don't think there's anything wrong with making notice of that and talking about it, riffing about it, talking to somebody about it. Or I do crowd work a lot. I used to have a whole breakdown of how I would do I had a headlining set. It was for me, because it was comfortable for me. It was 25 minutes of stuff that did really well mostly, and then but that wears out its welcome. After a while, people get sick of it. They not get sick of it, and then they've heard it, but they can hear it in your voice that you don't want to say it. And then about 10 minutes of stuff that does okay, because just to get the time in there. And then about during the check spot, which is about 12 minutes or 10 minutes, I'm doing most of the crowd work. And at the end, there's about 5 minutes or 5 to 7 minutes of the closing stuff that you can. It's almost just like a shotgun of just stuff that usually does well.
Yeah. That's a brilliant way of breaking it down. I'm gonna incorporate that into my brain going forward. That's really that's a really excellent way of looking at it, because you want to, like, it's almost like I'm trying to think of the metaphor I'm looking forward to. You definitely, like, there's a reason that, like, fireworks displays end really big. So you kind of want to want to plan for the roles if you're riding the waves of each situation in the set.
You could do a thing where what your goal should be is you're doing a thing where, especially on the road, I'm just talking about how the road set should be structured.
Yeah.
At least the last 5 minutes. If you're killing the last 5 minutes, like, say you bomb for 45 minutes, right? But you kill on the last 5. At least you get a couple of them be like, yeah, but that, you'll have that little tiny glimmer of hope in the set, and you can walk off like, okay, whatever it is. And then, but sometimes you think you have that, and then the whole set just goes shitty. But, like, it's the other thing I had to realize, and I was talking to this on another podcast recently. They're, especially on the road, they're there to have, most of them, 99.9% of them are there to have a good time.
Yeah.
And I think as comics in New York, I think we forget that a lot of the time, because we think of it as like, it's a battle. I'm going to win you over. I'm going to win this. It's a contest. And the fact of the matter is, if you think of it as, hey, everybody's here to have a good time, and you should want to have a good time, it helps. Like, I think it helps how you're standing and how you're talking and how you're telling your jokes. And like, I think it helps the vibe of the room if it's not just you're going out there and just firing shit at them and not caring about the whole culture of the room for a business term. You know what I'm saying? Like
Uh
you
huh.
want it to be like the whole idea is like, hey, we're all here. This is a comedy show. We're all here to have a good time. And I think, and I'm talking from personal experience, I would lose sight of that a lot of the time. I would lose sight
Mm-hmm.
of it and be like, here we go, going to work, and then go up and do the work thing, and then have the work
Yeah, yeah,
attitude and have the work, just like I'm some fucking, digging a ditch or something. And that's not what it is. It's like, hey, we're all here. Let's have a blast.
yeah. Exactly. Like, yeah. I think sometimes the this is like our evenings entertainment, and I'm an entertainer, kind of gets lost. Not even on like the arty pretentious stuff, or like people who are more political to be like, I'm gonna change the world with my jokes.
Yeah.
That
Right, exactly.
yeah, I that's something, and and entertaining people has value. I don't think that will ever not have value. Maybe it doesn't get talked about as such, but being providing someone a great time is important. I think can help you if you're feeling sad, or if you just like if it's been a long week and you're like,
Yeah.
okay, Sean Donnelly, funny bone. I'm gonna make it happen, and this will be a
Right,
great
right.
night.
And then a lot, I didn't realize that. I don't know if you feel the same way. Like when you go to New York, you don't get that feeling in New York. In New York, people are like, almost the vibe of the room is, hey, I could be doing 800 other things tonight. I'm in New York City. Make me laugh, kind of thing. That's the way you think of it, even if it's only in your brain. That's the way you're
Right,
thinking
right.
of it. The amount of times, like I've gone on the road, and I didn't even think of this. I don't even think of it that way. I think of it as like, oh, of course I'm gonna go do shows on the road because that's my job and that's what I want to do. But you've had people come up, and you probably had this happen. People come up and they thank you for traveling there and coming to the shows. First
Mm-hmm.
time that happened to me, I was blown away. I was
Yeah.
blown because I was like, oh yeah, of course, yeah. I'm like, that's not even a question of me doing that. Like I did it
Mm-hmm.
because I was getting paid, and I did it for a reason. But I'm also doing it because I want to be here. And then, it's it's such a heartfelt thing to say. Like, thank you for coming to our town and doing this. Like that's a really nice heartfelt thing to say for those people.
Absolutely, man, and that's super cool. Yeah, I've definitely had that experience. I've been fortunate enough to do a couple sets internationally, and the comics I've met doing those have been just so receptive and so welcoming. It's really cool.
Yeah. I think the people that really do well in this thing are the ones that have if you have if you can really have a positive attitude towards it the entire time. It's very hard to do because of how many strikes you can take and how many no's you can get and all that kind of stuff. But it's like if you have a positive outlook and you're getting better and you're making people laugh on stage, you'll be sought out. You'll be, in
Yeah.
one way or another, you'll be working in it, and you'll be like, that's what I've seen happen. Even the people that, even if it's not a certain cup of tea, but if they're resonating with some group of people and you're doing well on stage, at least you still have that win of like doing well. Even if the show business thing is like it's the people that you think should be famous aren't famous, if you have the the live part of the little battle of just win like having the win of that night of not even the win because that goes against what I was saying, and like the even just the positive experience of that night
Yeah.
and the moment, the positive moment of like oh wow, well this was fun, and it's like we should be embracing those instead of looking negating them. We should be embracing them instead of like forgetting about it and making it seem like it's like par for the course.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I agree with you completely. That's also how I think you're gonna keep yourself going, doing this like long term, because and I think this applies to many creative endeavors, because at the beginning can be so brutal for so long, and there's seemingly no, you don't feel like you're making, there's no like visible signs of progress, um, but like just remembering like why you're doing it and like the love of it, that carries you through even the rough nights, I
Right,
think.
right, exactly. And it's really easy to forget that. You
Yeah.
know,
How long have you been doing a radio show?
for the past like I've been doing a show on Sirius for the past like 4 years, but it just went weekly this past January.
Oh, cool.
It used to be monthly.
Oh, awesome. I'm so sorry. I didn't know that you had a radio show. What's your show called?
It's called Celebrate. It's on Raw Dog 99.
Oh, yeah. That's like the big comedy channel.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a comedy channel. Yeah. It's so it goes once every Wednesday at 4. We do it.
That's super cool. And what's like the format? Do you have like guests on? Is it like
We have a guest on, and then we celebrate one topic each week because the whole the elevator thing is that everything's so shitty right now. Let's be positive and celebrate one thing a week.
uh-huh. That's a good way to approach things. That's kind of how I feel um since lockdowns happened, like this has been like the main way I stay connected with people that are not
Mm-hmm.
my fiance. So and like I have listeners, and like people have reached out, and like I've been interviewing bands I've been fans of since I was a teenager. So like
That's awesome.
it's been super cool. I'll have an episode with Chris from Less Than Jake coming out next week. That'll be pretty exciting. So by the
That'll be
time
fantastic.
yeah, so by the time you're hearing this, listener, it's already out. So go find it. And you have one album that you did Manual Labor Face with Comedy Central, or is that independent?
That's Comedy Central. Yeah.
That's Comedy Central. Cool.
Yeah.
And do you have plans? I mean, this coronavirus probably twists it slightly, but is album number 2 in the works?
Yes, and coronavirus did twist it because I what you call it? I was supposed to record it in May,
Oh, really?
and it didn't. That didn't work out. So, yeah, I'm planning late fall maybe to redo it if I can start picking up spots from the
Mm-hmm.
beginning of the fall or the end of the summer kind of thing. But maybe I'll have to wait till next spring to record it if we're building back to comedy spots.
Yeah, totally. Because again, like what we were talking about earlier is, and especially if you're recording like a living uh, document of your set at that time, you need your sea legs back. To absolutely.
Exactly. Exactly.
Dude, I look forward to hearing it. I hope to. My plan is, I feel plan for myself after if things turn back to normal, at least normal enough where we get to perform again, is to be around more, because I think like I think I got rejected by too many friends who I have friends that have good shows, and I think I took some no's a little more personally than I should have.
Oh, okay.
So I sort of got wounded by stand up for a little while, but I really, and talking to people like you has made me realize why I love it and why I started loving
Oh,
it.
cool.
So being
All right,
around,
yeah.
so I hope to be around again. I don't know how long it'll take for my career to advance, but I definitely know I'm not going to take like shows for granted ever again after this.
Oh no, yeah, I think the idea is they try to like we were saying, man. Like I think just like focusing on the important parts of it. I think that's your best bet. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, I know exactly what you mean, Sean, and I'll keep that in my mind, and then how to structure a set, because I've been figuring out how to record stuff. I've been figuring out technology. I got plans for
Nice,
this
nice.
for this
Yeah.
new world, man. And where can people find your stuff if they want to check you out? And if you're listening,
Oh,
Sean's one of my favorite comics in New York. He makes me laugh every time I see him. You should check out his stuff.
thanks, dude. I'm at Shawnee Time. That's SeanyTime on Instagram and Twitter. And also, I have a new podcast.
Ooh,
It's called Skylight, and it's about UFOs. So I have one episode out so far. So check that out and subscribe, rate, and review it because I'm trying to really put a lot of eggs in that basket and get the word out.
awesome, fantastic, man. Well, if you do an episode about Tom DeLonge from Blink-182's UFO obsession and the stuff he's uncovered,
Yeah,
they're
I know
they're
all
my
about it.
they're
Yeah,
my
he does
favorite.
to the Stars Academy. Yeah, I probably will at one point do something about it.
Yeah, let me know. They've been my favorite band since I'm 13. I know a lot about that guy.
Okay, cool. Yeah, sounds good.
Awesome. Well, Sean, this has been fantastic, and I as I said earlier, I think you're really funny, and you're a good guy, man. I appreciate you taking time to talk to me today.
Thanks, Will. I appreciate it, man. That means a lot, dude. And then you're a good guy. It's good to see you. I haven't seen you in a long time, so I appreciate you having me, man.
Absolutely, man. This has been great. Thank you so much.
All right, talk to you later.
Bye. All right, that's comedian Sean Donnelly. That was a conversation that really kind of got me excited about the idea of stand-up comedy again, and I really enjoyed getting to chat with Sean. As Sean mentioned, he has a show on Sirius XM. You can also get his album Manual Labor Face wherever you get your comedy albums, and also album number 2 will be heading along shortly. I also have links for social media in the description. That's our show for today, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this. If you enjoyed this episode and think you have a friend who might want to listen to this podcast as well, we are available wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Stitcher, and Spotify. You can also get a free month of Stitcher Premium when you sign up with the promo code AWESOME in all caps at stitcher.com/premium. You can get a free month with the promo code AWESOME. And I just really enjoyed that. I also want to give a shout out to my supporter on Patreon at the awesome producer level, Maribeth Mooney. Thank you so much for your support. I sincerely appreciate your support, especially during this time, and hope you and everyone listening to this is doing well. If you're curious about what I've got going on, you can go to patreon.com/awesomedisaster. Check out some of the exclusive things that I'm doing over there. I'm making playlists. You can hear songs, original songs I've written before they're released to the public, and including an upcoming solo EP I've got going on, as well as songs from quarantine demos from my band Bright Ugly. And thanks for being here. If you are outside protesting, wear a mask, stay safe, and take care of others. And if you are inside, I hope you're doing well, and take care of those that are closest to you, including and as well as those around you, because that's how we will beat this. And by this, I mean whatever you're thinking about right now, because there's a lot to think about given the state of the world at present. Thank you guys for being here, and I'll see you next time between Awesome and Disaster. Stay safe, everybody.